like it's 9:01 and we'll go ahead and get started. I want to welcome everybody today to the Arizona Association for Economic Development for Elected Officials. I am Carrie Kelly, Executive Director of AAD, and I'm delighted to have you join us today for this training. Before we start, I want to ask if there are any members of the media, if you could identify yourself in the chat feature, just so the panelists know that you are here. Mignon Hollis, Board President of AAD, sends her regrets and she couldn't be here today. But we have Lori Collins, President-elect and Deputy Economic Development Director for the City of Mesa, here with us, and she will start our event.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us. It's our pleasure to present this first ever Economic Development 101 for elected officials, and we really appreciate you taking the time out of your busy schedules to join us and learn a little bit more about what we do and the role of economic development and how you could become an economic development champion. Next slide, please. Really quickly, I just wanted to go over the history of AAD. We've actually been an organization since 1974, initially formed as the Arizona Association for Industrial Development. And that started as a business recruitment organization. There wasn't as many economic development organizations at a local level back then as there is now. And so AAID actually carried that banner for the state of Arizona. In 1991, though, we had a name change to Arizona Association for Economic Development, and we've continued to evolve since then. Next slide. As you can see now, we do have more than 500 members, really representing every corner of the state. We do have a lot of those working specifically on the public sector side in economic development, but we also had a lot of really key private sector partners that we work with on a daily basis. We have, we think, a very diverse set of membership. Next. So AAD is, the mission is to be a unified voice for responsible economic development in the state of Arizona. We focus on three areas: educate, advocate, and collaborate. And then there's some organizational functions that we have as part of our strategic plan as well, focusing on member services, the fiscal management of our organization, and marketing and PR. Next. And we would encourage all of you, we do have a special membership rate for elected officials. If you're interested, please reach out to Meg or Carrie when this wraps up, or even send a quick note to them in the chat feature or follow up afterwards. We'd love to have you join the organization. But first, I wanted to give a quick overview of what is economic development. And this is defined by the International Economic Development Council, who is partnering with the National League of Cities to bring an additional economic development for elected officials. And we will put information about that in the chat feature as well. So if it's something that you're interested in following up more, you can see what that particular program is about. So economic development, broadly defined, is a group of programs or activities seeking to improve the economic well-being and quality of life for a community. And this can be achieved by a number of ways. But a few years ago, when I was working for City of Phoenix, I actually had a longtime community advocate from Maryville who said, that's just so much words to describe that. Really what I think economic development is by the end of the day is, are there good opportunities for jobs for people in your community close to where they live? And don't you think that really is just a very simple but meaningful way to describe what we do on a day-to-day basis? And so you'll see that there's a lot of different facets, and as you hear from our speakers today, you'll see that that really covers an entire range depending on the community needs and where the community is located, can take on very different forms. Next slide. So these key functions of local economic development range from strategic planning. There's a lot of marketing. I often define economic development in two camps, product marketing and product improvement. And I think you'll hear some of those today defined that way too. A lot of us as economic development developers at our heart are salespeople, but we also work very hard to continue to improve the local conditions so that job growth can take place, so that we can diversify that tax base, so that talent continues to develop and we can continue to improve the quality of life in our community. And so again, you'll hear, we worked really hard to assemble a diverse group of professionals who have really great experience in economic development to help describe some of these for you today. Next. And finally, as you're thinking about economic development and listening to our speakers today, think about the role that you may take as an elected leader, whether it's a student, a convener, a listener, a policymaker, again, that salesperson, and finally an ambassador. And these are all different ways that we become involved in a champion for economic development. Next slide. So before I introduce our speakers, I think we have a quick poll that we would love for you to participate in. And that is, where would you rank your understanding of economic development on a scale from 1 to 10? 1 being none and 10 being an expert. As you're taking the time to fill that out, I want to introduce our speakers to you today. Again, I think we did some quick math, and I think we have compiled over 100 years of economic development experience for you on this panel today. So it is a rare treat. I can't wait to hear all of them. First, we'll have Vic Naroussis, who is the Senior Vice President of Business Attraction for the Arizona Commerce Authority. He oversees the ACA's domestic and international efforts to bring businesses to Arizona who don't currently have a presence in the state. Now, Vic joined us most recently from the state of Illinois, and we so appreciate the experience that he brings to our statewide organization as well. Then next, we'll hear from my good friend and mentor, Chris Mackey. Her department, or she heads up the Community and Economic Development Department for the City of Phoenix. Her department focuses on business attraction, business retention and expansion, small business and entrepreneurial efforts, downtown development, international outreach, and workforce development. She is one of the busiest people that I know and is, I think, arguably one of the best economic developers in the entire country. So I know you're all anxious to hear from the incomparable Chris Mackey. We've also heard from Victor Gonzalez, who's the Economic Development Director for the town of Sahuarita. Victor's experience spans over 19 years, literally from one corner of the state to the other. He's worked in Douglas, Flagstaff, Yuma, and Gilbert. He just always brings such a refreshing perspective. So I think it'll be a real treat to hear from Victor today. Then last but certainly not least, Eric Bopp, who's the Executive Director of Economic Development for the ASU Knowledge Enterprise. Eric promotes assets available at ASU to private sector professionals and leads economic development efforts with specific focus on the development of the Novus Innovation Corridor, ASU Poly Research Park, and other ASU innovation zones. Eric also has a breadth of experience, not just related to Arizona, and he will be a great speaker to wrap things up for us today. So again, reminding you, if you have questions today, add them into the Q&A function and not the chat feature. However, if you do want to use that to network with your colleagues, it's always nice to see people announce who they are and where they're from in the chat feature, but please reserve your questions for Q&A so that we can grab those quickly and put those into our system and get them in the queue so that we can get those answered. And we have the poll results. So it looks like, again, pretty diverse understanding of economic development, and we hope that you'll continue to join us for this entire series. And we see these numbers change a little bit. You really are key partners with us in economic development, and so we're happy to bring this content to you and really see a long-term relationship developing with our elected officials and AAAD and the professionals that are members of AAAD. So you can see where most of our folks fall, right in that, ranging from a 5 to 6 and 7. I'm glad to see that nobody said that they really don't have any understanding of economic development. I don't know how many folks would admit that. But again, we're happy to have you all join us today. Without further ado, I would like to turn it over to our next speaker. Thank you very much.
Good morning, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here today and have the opportunity to speak to you. I'm Vic Naroussis. I oversee the business attraction team here for the Arizona Commerce Authority. And as Lori mentioned, our primary activity in that role is to bring businesses to Arizona that aren't here. If you could go to the next slide, please. So I'd like to talk about some of the changes at the ACA that we've undergone here this year to advance economic development activities. We now have a target industry focus. Historically, we had focused on regions of the United States where we would engage in our outreach efforts. And while that allowed us to be efficient in our travel, it really didn't allow us to develop the depth of knowledge that we needed to tie to the target industries identified in our strategic plan. So this year we have worked very diligently so that every member of the business attraction team is a specialist in an industry, and you certainly don't become a specialist overnight. But our goal is to be identified as an expert in the United States in targeted industry fields, so that we can go out and speak on behalf of Arizona in an authoritative manner with the goal of being able to attract even more businesses here. One of the other primary things that we have changed here is we are now business case focused, which ties into the third point. Historically, we would talk a lot about incentives when we would engage a company. 90% of our discussion would be about incentives, and 10% would be about how we could help them with other issues such as workforce or foreign trade, or connecting with our educational or our workforce partners. We have completely flip-flopped that paradigm where incentives are 10% of our conversation now, and solving for the business case is 90%, because at the end of the day, incentives go away. And we want to make sure that the companies that we are recruiting here have a reason to stay beyond the incentives so that they continue to grow and expand here. Companies can expand in many other states, and we want to make sure that when we bring them here, they continue to expand here. And then the last is training site selectors, that there's more to Arizona than just Phoenix. I ran into this in Illinois as well with the city of Chicago, and people in, site selectors are in to get business done, right? So they do what they're familiar with. In Illinois, they would ask to do business in Chicago, just as in Arizona, most site selectors want to know what's available in Phoenix. But certainly there's much more available in Arizona than just the Phoenix metropolitan area. And I know that Chris even knows that as well. So we work diligently to expand the knowledge of Arizona among site selectors, and we work very closely to understand the top needs of a project, so that when we understand those top needs, we can match those needs with the assets of communities around the entire state. So it's an important thing for us. It doesn't happen overnight with site selectors, but we're making great progress, and we're excited to be able to announce projects outside of just the Phoenix metropolitan area. Next slide, please. So some of Arizona's economic strengths, if you can't tell, it's workforce. I have a little bit of perspective on that, having come from the state of Illinois, where we didn't have the coordination that we have here in Arizona with our educational partners and our workforce partners. What we have here in Arizona is so special and so strong and so unique. It is, I think, among the best in the country, and our ability to communicate our workforce strengths and deliver on our workforce strengths puts us at the very top of the states in the United States. And when you talk to virtually any company or site selector, workforce will be their critical issue. Very briefly, I can tell you the story about how projects can be cited in communities where there's no workforce and they fail quickly. So it is all about workforce. We have a very competitive cost structure as well. We're very collaborative. Economic development is a team sport. And we work closely with our community, certainly, but our utility, our workforce, and our education partners. That collaboration is unique, I think, here in Arizona as well. We're also a right to work state, which provides us with significant opportunities with large manufacturers, which is a very central point of our attraction activities. And we are sector focused, and you can learn more about that in the industries on our website. Next slide, please. Our regulatory environment is also something important to us in being able to stand out among other states. We have the FinTech and PropTech sandboxes, which allow companies in the property management and financial services field to explore ways of delivering their products in a reduced regulatory environment that wouldn't otherwise normally be available. And Arizona is the first state in the country to make those available. So we really have some very unique things that allow us to do some things in these spaces. We also have that trailing spouse license certificate acceptance, which has been a significant benefit of attracting more and more folks to the state of Arizona. And we have, I think you all know, an overall minimalistic approach to regulation in this state, especially when you look at states like California, one of our most significant competitors, or even Texas. And I think one more slide possibly, or is that my last one? One more. ACA and our local partners. Yes, our local partners are critical to all of this. Economic development is a team sport, and we work very closely to earn the right to be trusted by all of you. We do talk more than just about incentives, although people continue to think about the ACA as primarily incentives based. We really want to solve for the company's business case. We want to work with you on that. We have very powerful databases and sources of information that we spend significant amounts of money on every year that we can make available to you to help communicate that business case. We've enhanced our PIF process, as I mentioned briefly, with the site selector. So we are working very diligently to get site selectors to look at communities outside of just the Phoenix metropolitan area. We look forward to virtual presentations from all of you. We have begun that process in the last 4 or 5 months, and we found it very beneficial for the business attraction team to get an update about what's going on in your community and how we can best work together. And then, as I also mentioned, we do have great access to information and data in our research teams that we would really value making that available to you, working together to attract new businesses. So I think, is that it for me? Yes. Thank you all very much. Look forward to working with you. And if you have any questions, look forward to making that contact.
By the end of this pandemic, I'll have found the mute on all of the programs that are online for virtual. So good morning, I'm Chris Mackey. I am the Director of Community and Economic Development for the City of Phoenix. Thank you so much for having me here today. And I'm looking forward to hearing all my colleagues' presentations and then answering questions at the end. So next slide, please. So as you know, as my colleagues have talked about, as Vic was talking about, this is definitely not just a Metro Phoenix play in economic development. As all of the economic developers and our elected officials here in the state of Arizona, I think one of the things that we're most proud of is how closely we all work together in leveraging our workforce, in leveraging our job centers and our assets to work really well together. So while my paycheck has a bird on it, and my job is to land companies for the city of Phoenix, we work unbelievably closely with not just the 24 cities that make up Maricopa County, but I talk regularly with Tucson and Flagstaff and Prescott and Yuma and other areas as we really work together to bring the best to the state of Arizona. I think when we admire what is best about other states and other states that do it well in economic development and recruit the most thought-leading and even basic industry companies, it's because when they go after a company to bring those quality jobs back, they do it in a cohesive manner. They do it in working together. You never feel like it's a competition, more like it's a co-opetition. So regionalism is incredibly important as we continue to grow and thrive. Next slide. And one of the reasons that that's so critically important is really cities only know where their borders are located. We might be Phoenix on one side of the street and we're Peoria on the other side of the street, or we're Phoenix on one side of the street and Chandler on the other side of the street. So we're really the only ones, and I think we only know it because our street signs change colors as we move through. But what's important is the regional and statewide economic impact of projects that come into the community. So while Mesa may land a project, their employees may live in Phoenix and support the economy in Phoenix. So their suppliers are in Goodyear or they're in Chandler. So we work really across borders to ensure that our citizens have great jobs and that we bring capital investment into the community. Lori put it incredibly well as she opened things up. People can use a lot of $5 words to talk about economic development, but it's about a quality job and investment that we can then repurpose for other things that are important to our citizens. So this, as an example, is Honeywell. Honeywell, of course, is a large Phoenix and Tempe employer, but they supply economic impact over the entire state of Arizona at the level of $2.4 billion on an annual economic output. And that's across all of Maricopa County and the state of Arizona. Next slide. So as we look at what is important in our vision and goals in the city of Phoenix, Vic put it incredibly well. I started this in this business more decades ago than I care to admit. I'm afraid I'm skewing the number in that 100 years. And I apologize to my panel members for that in making you be as old as I am. But workforce is, you know, you talk about what's number one, number two, and number three. When I started in this business, it was, where's an inexpensive place for real estate? Where's my transportation corridor? And how much money are you going to give me to come to be in your city? And now it's not. And the top three items are workforce, workforce, and workforce. Companies have figured out that that is their primary asset that they can't replace. And they're going to where that qualified workforce is. And that's really been a significant reason why Arizona has changed in the type of jobs it recruits over the last 10 years, is that extreme focus on workforce by you, our elected officials, by our educational institutions, and by our universities. So in Phoenix, when we look at that vision and goal, we have 14 employment corridors in the city of Phoenix. We focus strongly, as you know, on our new urban tech here in our central city of downtown and growing kind of the heart of the urban core, creating a vibrant kind of 24/7. Really, I mean, honestly, I would tell you we're trying to create an 18-hour economy. New York and Las Vegas have a 24-hour economy, but Metro Phoenix is turning into an 18-hour economy. And what I mean by that is you're working during the day, then you're going out at night and you're enjoying restaurants and libation, and you're enjoying music and sporting venues and things all over the region. But community development is critically important when you look at the fact that Phoenix will be 150 years old next year. Some of our areas of Metro Phoenix and other state areas of the state are looking at redevelopment now. So our city alone, about 65% of our city is built out, and part of our city is 150 years old. Right now, we're doing a project on 3rd Avenue that we're replacing the oldest water line in the city of Phoenix, and it's 103 years old. So, and then we're focusing on development that is greenfield development on things that have never seen a shovel on them, since dirt was invented. So it's a real dichotomy in our community development of all the things that we're working on. Higher education is incredibly important as we look at certifications, as we look at jobs moving forward and attracting really knowledge intensive economies, but not just for the workforce. It's the research partnerships, and it's those partnerships that we create with our universities and our community colleges and our other higher education platforms in bringing in businesses and creating partnerships with our businesses to draw them into Arizona. And then, of course, entrepreneurship. When you look at the focus that the state of Arizona puts on entrepreneurship, it really is because we still have that Wild West mentality. We do it our own way. We start companies our own way. And when you see who is here, that was started right here in a coffee shop or someone's basement or garage or kitchen table, these are incredible companies that have a great attachment to Arizona because this is where they were founded. We'd lose less companies to poaching if they were founded here in Arizona than other areas. Next slide. So if we look at Phoenix and what is really important in our vision and goals, we have targeted industries that we look at that drive jobs into the community. And while we have targeted industries, it doesn't mean those are the only industries that we work with. These are kind of our leading sector industries that we work with. And the reason that we do is they have a strong economic multiplier. And what I mean by that is there's a lot of support companies that come in to support those companies that really provide a quality job for all of our citizens. So while you might not be an engineer in some technology manufacturing company, that technology manufacturing company supports transportation and logistics, basic manufacturing, assembly, and all these other types of sectors. So as we look at what we work on in attraction, it's because of the broad base that they bring in other sectors. Next slide. And then we look at the needs of our business community, and they're ever changing and ever growing, but these really are the basic needs of our local businesses that we hear from them on a constant basis as we're doing business retention and expansion visits. They really are relying on all of you to provide a stable business operating environment for them to do their business. We talk about workforce, they're looking for that talented workforce, but their workforce needs training. It needs partnerships with cities and universities, community colleges and others to keep upskilling their workforce or even bringing in those basic skills of a workforce to keep them growing here. They're looking for modern infrastructure so that they can keep attaching to cities and states infrastructure and keep growing. Access to capital, that's a growing need, particularly in the time of a pandemic. Businesses are all looking for stable capital. And of course, an abundance of energy and natural resources so they can keep growing here. So I thank you and look forward to the rest of the presentations and our questions.
Thank you, Christine. Good morning, everyone who's joining us this morning on this webinar. My name is Victor Gonzalez. I'm the Economic Development Director for the town of Sahuarita. And really what I wanted to do this morning is really touch on 3 points. Next slide, please. These 3 points, if you will, are the first 2 are foundational. And the third point is really about culture. I know for us who've spent time in rural communities in rural Arizona, you know, there's a big challenge, and that challenge is, where do we start? In some cases, we have either a one-person or no economic development office, and so either the town manager or the city manager or the council members themselves really become that advocate, or if you will, that person wearing the economic development hat. So what I thought I'd share with you in these next 7 minutes is really 3 things to keep in mind. Again, the first 2 are foundational, and the last one is really about creating that culture in your community. Because for rural communities, it's where do you start? That's the question. You see what's happening in metro areas, and it's easily, one can easily get anxious, excited, not know where to start in terms of creating those headlines that we want to create. But the first point I want to make is really there's no me without you, but no you without me. And what I'm trying to say about that is that in another way, what's good for you is good for me, and it's all about regionalism. Christine just mentioned about the regionalism approach to the greater Phoenix area, and the same is true for rural communities. What's good for the city of Yuma is good for the city of San Luis, as well as the rest of Yuma County and the town of Welton. What's good for Flagstaff is good for the outlying areas in Coconino County. And what's happening in Sierra Vista has a trickle-down effect to the city of Douglas and other communities in Cochise County. So it's all about regionalism, because in rural communities, it's not so much about us and me, but it's about sharing those resources within that region, sharing the resources, sharing the tools that we have are disposed in the county. But also the regionalism approach puts a rural community or that rural area on the map. It essentially begins to establish, you know, an identity for that region. But most importantly, when you establish that region, you begin to create a community identity. So, you know, I'll take Cochise County as an example. Sierra Vista and Fort Huachuca, huge presence in the defense sector and a number of other tech-related sectors there in that community. And so it has created this identity in Cochise County by way of Sierra Vista, but there's some opportunities for the outlying communities to leverage that identity. City of Douglas being on the border and having a fence and a barrier, could they be a good option for a border security and defense technology that wants to establish a proving ground or prove their technology in the real world? So that's a great example of how, again, it's all about regionalism. What's good for you is good for me, and finding ways how you as an individual rural community can take the assets of the greater county and start to identify or create that identity for you and leverage the conditions, the strengths, the weaknesses, address the weaknesses and the opportunities, but be able to establish those foundational building blocks of where you can go from there. The second point I'd like to make is the 80% rule. Very foundational. The 80% rule is all new jobs in small towns come from existing business expansion. And so as much as we in rural communities want to get the big headline, right, 500 jobs, 1,000 jobs in the community, quite honestly, we are limited in what we can do. We are limited in resources and organizational capacity. And so knowing that the 80% rule in terms of jobs being created by our existing businesses, what can we do in rural communities to address the needs of our businesses? One, for entrepreneurs, can we provide our own community as a proving ground? Here in the town of Sahuarita, we've identified several entrepreneurs in our community, and we've made the town available as a proving ground. A few years ago, we worked with a startup company that was developing a drone technology, and we offered up our police department to be the guinea pig for the use of drones. It was a great trade-off in that our police department was able to get trained and certified to fly drones, and this entrepreneur was able to validate their technology. So I would challenge, rural communities to identify your entrepreneurs and really provide your community as a proving ground. For small businesses, right, those businesses along Main Street, again, how do we help them increase or create those jobs? And really what small businesses need in our community, especially in rural communities, is one, reliable information. And that's an opportunity for you to be that point of contact and that source of information. Second, they're relying on information that's filtered. One of the things that we found ourselves doing a lot here in the town of Sahuarita during the month of April was filtering through all the information that was coming down this massive pipeline, information of the federal resources, information on the state resources, guidelines, and so on and so forth. And so businesses were very appreciative when we reached out and filtered that information for them and provided what they needed to know. And finally, small businesses in our community really need that information to be credible. And so that's a role that as a local jurisdiction elected official you can play. And finally, what are the needs in the community that supports your businesses? Again, all about how do we assure ourselves that we are accomplishing that 80% rule. And there's some questions that you have to ask yourselves, I know, as an elected official in rural communities, is that do you expand, the water and sewer lines to service what you've identified as a business park, or do you spend those dollars on expanding sidewalks in your residential neighborhoods? Do you invest in economic development staffing, or do you invest in your Parks and Rec staff? Do you go after grant funding to fund your marketing efforts, or do you yourself make an investment for sustainable funding? So all those things, need to be taken into account in order to really look at how you continue to have your existing jobs existing businesses create those jobs. And finally, in these last minutes or so that I have left, as I mentioned, the first 2 points are foundational. There's no me without you, no you without me, all about regionalism. The second point, the 80% rule, all new jobs in small towns come from existing business expansion. And finally, the last one is how do you advance economic development in your community? And this is all about culture, because when you're in rural community, it's you can easily get distracted. There's uncertainty because maybe lack of sustainable funding, and so there's a turnover of who's in economic development, who's on first, who's on second, and so on and so forth. And so the approach I like to take, and I know this may be contrary to what the other speakers have made mention, but quite frankly, how do you advance economic development in your community? I would say it's, we as economic developers or folks that wear the economic development hat, we're not so much in the business of creating jobs, but we're in the business of really being good stewards and good servants. And what I mean by that is the who. We have been tasked as economic developers to really work to address our community's conditions. And secondly, we've been tasked to be good servants, to understand the assets of our community, and most importantly, serve alongside and serve collectively with others. This is a team sport when you approach economic development. Certainly the case is more so in rural community with the limited resources and staffing. And so I would just leave you with that last thought in terms of being in the business of being good stewards and good servants. So with that, I'm look forward to the Q&A session afterwards.
Eric Bopp, Arizona State University. I'm in the academic world these days, so I'm going to start off my presentation with a pop quiz for everyone. There were some questions that were prepared that made me start thinking about what differentiates real estate development from economic development from community development. And I think that's important for all of us to kind of have an understanding of the difference between real estate development, economic development, and community development. And what I've been thinking about for the past 24 hours is Central Park in New York City. That if you took Central Park in New York City and left it to the real estate development community, there probably would be a high-rise residential building. There might be some self-storage. Heaven forbid, there might be a dispensary or two, but they're going to maximize the land valuation of the land that would be in Central Park in the middle of New York City, a very prime location. If you left it up to the economic development community, they probably would have turned to the Amazon HQ2 RFP. They probably would have thought about jobs, and jobs. How could an investment in Central Park in the middle of New York City create the most opportunity for the community surrounding Central Park from a job standpoint, from a capital investment standpoint, and that would be the economic development mindset. The community development mindset in this case won out, and obviously Central Park is what it is today, which is a world-class, world-renowned park that provides value, immeasurable value to the entire community in and around Central Park in downtown New York City. There's never a right or wrong answer on what should win out in that discussion, but I think it's important for all of us to recognize the different approaches, different components within our community take when we're looking at how to utilize a piece of land, a resource, or an asset within our community. So next slide. We always like to point out the charter of Arizona State University. We are a comprehensive, innovative public research university. We may need to throw that word in the future. We were just named for the 6th year in a row the most innovative university in the U.S. We are measured not by whom we exclude, by whom we include, and how they succeed. We like to advance research and discovery of public value and assume fundamental responsibility for the economic, social, cultural, and overall health of the communities it serves. We are not here as a university just to do one thing. We are here as a university to serve the communities in the state of Arizona. I think if you asked all of our economic development partners in and around the state of Arizona, when we talk about workforce, when we talk about the needs that companies have when they're considering locating here, I hope and I think everybody would say ASU bends over backwards and will do whatever it takes to help work with those companies. We work closely with the Arizona Commerce Authority. We work closely with the Greater Phoenix Economic Council. We work closely with our local economic development partners. And it is always a good day in our economic development office when our colleagues from around the state reach out to us and ask for help on a project to demonstrate our capabilities, whether it be from a talent development standpoint or a research and development standpoint, but we certainly are part of that team that wants to see Arizona succeed. Next slide. We have a pretty simple to explain, a little bit more difficult to implement twofold mission of our economic development efforts at ASU. We like to promote our innovation zones. We have 6, soon to be 7 innovation zones in and around the Phoenix metro area, where we have real estate holdings that we want to maximize the opportunity of those locations to find good fit tenants that make sense in the community, that make sense working with ASU, that can continue to grow the economy in and around our campuses around the Phoenix metro area. And then equally important, we want to help Arizona be more competitive. We want to leverage the assets at ASU to help Arizona attract and expand new business and industry. And this isn't just about our 127,000 students that we have. It's about our faculty, our staff. The expertise that resides here at this university is pretty phenomenal. And so it's always a pleasure when a company is in town or a company is growing and looking to expand, when we can connect our subject matter experts with those companies to help them understand how we can develop additional curriculum, additional research, additional activity will help those companies be more competitive and help Arizona be a long-term home for those companies. Next slide. Next slide. There we go. Mentioned our 6 innovation zones. Sometimes it's good. We can stay on this slide. That's fine. Oh, there we go. We have, this is a quick breakdown for everyone's reference point of our locations around the valley. Everybody is familiar with our Tempe campus. They may not have heard about the Novus Innovation Corridor. It's 300 acres we have adjacent to our Tempe campus. A lot of it's the former Karsten Golf Course that we are converting into a world-class mixed-use development. ASU SkySong, we're working on building number 6 at ASU SkySong. Millions of square feet of office and development activities are taking place there. Our ASU Research Park, we still have 2 parcels of land that we're looking for the right fit tenants to develop. Our Arizona Health Solutions Corridor in conjunction with the Mayo Clinic is a wonderful opportunity. Our ASU West Campus and our ASU Polytechnic Campus have land that are in the early stages of development. And then I would be remiss if I didn't mention the Phoenix Biomedical Campus that the City of Phoenix what was a critical partner in starting and developing. We are fortunate to be leasing about 7 acres of land from the City of Phoenix that we're working on developing hand in hand with Chris and her team, and we are excited about those developments as well. Next slide. I think all of my colleagues mentioned that economic development is a team effort. These are some of the strategic partners we work with on a daily, weekly, monthly basis. It really takes a village to attract these companies. It's a highly competitive landscape. We have a great group of professionals here in Arizona at the state level, at the regional level, at the local level, at the utility level, and it takes all of us as we work together hand in hand to try to continue to grow our economy. We want it to be as a resilient of economy as possible. Obviously, the recent developments with COVID-19 have been very painful to witness and to see firsthand how it can damage our economy, how it can change people's lives and impact households. And we are all collectively working to develop a more resilient economy here in Arizona. I think when you look at where Arizona was 10 years ago, 20 years ago, we certainly have come an extremely long way and have developed a world-class economy, and I think all of us on this call are looking to push that even more forward and to make a good and a better economy, the best economy we can have in the U.S. and around the world. I think that's the end of my presentation, and we'll kick things back to Carrie and for the question and answer session.
Thank you, everybody. So now I want to launch another poll. Let me see if I can pull it up. There we go. And while you're voting, I want to introduce our next speaker. But first, I wanted to take time to thank our series sponsor, SRP. Joining us from SRP is Carla Moran. She is a senior project manager in economic development. And I did want to give Carla a lot of props. This initiative came from an idea that Carla had, and she brought together a rockstar AAD committee to develop this training. And it's been really wonderful to work with her and that committee. And of course, we have some amazing, awesome speakers as well, and you heard a lot of them today. So while you're voting, I want to turn it over to Carla.
Thank you so much, Carrie. I appreciate everybody joining us today. We'll launch right into the questions and answers because we are a little bit short on time, but I think the poll is about closed up now. So as soon as that does.
Let me share the results.
Wonderful. So it looks like infrastructure, looks like one of the largest hurdles, and then education. I'm gonna actually ask Vic what he thinks our largest economic hurdle is.
You know, certainly infrastructure and education are critical elements to economic development, without a doubt. And I think probably every state in the United States wishes that they could do that in a better way. You know, from my perspective, having worked in another state at a similar level and having done this at the state level for 5 years and understanding what goes on in other states, while we certainly may have challenges in those areas, I think we're in far better shape than most are. You know, for me, I think our biggest challenges are perceptions that non-Arizonans have of Arizona. I think a lot of people in the business world think all of Arizona is a desert, and that there are certain types of businesses that can't succeed here because of that. You know, and I was one of those when I first got here. I did a lot in the food processing industry when I was in Illinois. And I thought, well, there's no water in Arizona. I'm not going to be doing that here now. Wow, was I wrong? There is a very robust food processing and beverage sector here in Arizona because we know how to manage water, and we can successfully attract those types of businesses. That's just one example of perceptions. I think the other example is that we have an old population, so we don't have a workforce that meets the needs. Wow, is that wrong too? You know, I think people think of Arizona as Sun City. It's far from that. So I think a lot of our hurdles are old impressions of Arizona, and working to get people outside of the state to understand how vibrant, how connected we are here in a way that very few other states are, and how we can leverage that to solve for companies' business cases in a way that few other states can.
Thank you, Vic. Chris, you talked about the employment areas. How important is having a strategic vision for an employment area in kind of seeing out how it moves forward?
Absolutely. So with that strategic vision for an employment area, I think is critical as we're working to attract, kind of Eric Bopp put it well, whether it's economic development, real estate development, or community development, companies that are coming in and the community that's coming in that wants to locate in a certain area, they want to see what the city's vision is. And at ultimate build out of our cities, we need to have employment corridors that are completely organized and sustainable. So if I live in an employment corridor, I should be able to work in the employment corridor and shop in the employment corridor. I shouldn't have to drive 30 miles to get to my job or 60 miles to get to my job unless I want to. So I disagree a little bit with Vic on the perception of Arizona, which he's not wrong on, but for me, it is infrastructure. And those employment corridors it's the vision and the strategic planning of the infrastructure in those up and coming employment corridors that will attract those companies. So it's the land planning, it's the infrastructure investment up front or the infrastructure planning up front, and then of course the creativity and being able to market those areas. But you wrap it all up with the most important part of the visioning of those employment corridors is the community. And that's really understanding the community's vision and how they want to connect and how they want to engage. You know, the last thing as an economic developer I want to do is go into an area and say, I think it should be X, and I have 100,000 citizens saying, well, we think it should be Y. Clearly I missed the boat if we aren't in touch with our community through our elected officials' offices on a constant basis to understand really the visioning of those employment corridors.
Victor, now obviously employment corridors might be a little bit different. Maybe it's a whole city plan, but what's your thoughts on how having a city strategic plan might be beneficial for a long-term vision?
Yeah, absolutely. For a rural community, I think it's the number one thing that if you invest in anything the first couple of years as a city, as a rural community is on the strategic plan. One, it gets everybody on the same page because there's difference of opinion as to what economic development should look like. Border cities will want more retail because of the inflow of the cross-border shopper. Other rural communities may want some type of industry base. And so there's difference of opinion as to what should be prioritized. There's different opinions of how that should be approached. But the most important part of the strategic planning process is the sustainability of it and the commitment, because there's a lot of excitement at the front end when you have, a new blood in town, whether that's a new economic development, a new city manager, or elected officials. So with the strategic plan, what it does, it gets everybody buy-in, but then it's a reminder of what we've committed to and sustaining that. So I strongly believe that really the strategic plan is the foundational piece. It's also going to address the who we are and what we aspire to be, and it's going to be a reality check as well. And so I encourage that it be a facilitated process where you have somebody come from the outside in and do that, rather than try to create this approach yourself internally. Because you want to have those very, very hard discussions and really have that reality check of, hey, we may want a distribution center in Southeast Cochise County, but the fact of the matter, that might not be the reality. And so those conversations need to have. So yeah, absolutely. For our rural electeds who are on the call, if there's anything they commit to the first couple of years, I would say funding a strategic plan.
Thank you, Victor. Eric, how do you connect with companies that are looking to relocate or expand?
There's a lot of different approaches to take. From my perspective, we have a wonderful state economic development organization that has robust outreach and marketing efforts. We work closely with them, make sure we're connected with them. We have a wonderful regional economic development organization that has robust outreach and marketing efforts. Our local economic developers have their own outreach and marketing efforts. From ASU and our small economic development team standpoint, first and foremost, we want to make sure that we are educating and informing our partners of what the opportunity is with ASU, so that when they're out traveling the world and looking for these opportunities for the state of Arizona, that we are well positioned with those individuals. We also look closely with the brokerage community and the site selection community. A lot of projects are originating there, locating there. We want to make sure that they're aware of the opportunity here at ASU. So we take a very diversified approach, trying to make sure we cover all of our bases. And then at the end of the day, there's still opportunity for us to use data analytics. There's a platform we utilize called Gazelle that looks at companies, looks at their background, looks at how they're growing, expanding, provides us with some values of which companies around the U.S., around the world might be expanding soon, and then we can directly reach out to them. But it's a complex methodology. But we got to collaborate with everyone around the region in order to best utilize the few resources we do have to market and outreach to those companies.
Thanks, Eric. There's a question in the chat that I think Chris Mackey might be a good one for. How do you balance the request for zoning changes to mixed use with retail and apartments versus the vision of neighborhoods to maintain the character of the area?
Oh, absolutely. That, as you can imagine, with a 517 square mile city, we deal with that pretty often. So first, I think it is you can't wait for development to come to understand what the community's vision is as to what they want to see around them. So getting engaged early with the community and understanding specific areas. So we have 14 employment corridors in Phoenix and dozens and dozens and dozens and dozens of neighborhood communities. We work closely with our council offices because they usually have the finger on the pulse of the, their specific community areas. We spend a lot of time, our planning department and economic development, at community meetings, in meeting with the council members and the community, really gaining an understanding of what the community is interested in. But sometimes, you've got an area that wants a Whole Foods and a Trader Joe's when really what it can support is a smaller grocery store or something. It's getting the community to understand that there are certain metrics that have to be hit before some of these big retailers or others come in that they're interested in. As an example, we hear a lot, I only want X. Well, X takes 5,000 in workforce that all have doctorate degrees and different things. So I think it's the dialogue with the community, and when they find out and when you're honest and transparent about what it takes to get things done, you'll usually get their buy-in. Now, also, it's our responsibility as economic developers to make professional recommendations based on what's best for the entire city and to help the entire city grow. So I think I would say that it's engage early and engage often with the community, explain to them why some of the things that they want aren't necessarily something the city can deliver, but then also engaging them when industry comes and having industry fit a lot of the needs that they have and respond to a lot of the requirements and requests that they have. Just being open and transparent.
Great, thank you, Chris. We're close to time, so I want to be respectful of everybody's time. We know we packed in a lot within this hour. We have a series coming up, so we hope you all can join us for that. There's a couple more questions in the chat. Feel free to reach out to us. We can answer them and get you some more answers with the questions that you provided. But we thank you for your time today and want to thank all the panelists for providing your insight. Quite diverse group of individuals on this panel, and so I do appreciate your time. And I wanted to thank everybody and thank AAD for helping us put this on.
You will receive another link after this meeting for our next meeting, which is workforce and pipeline training. So expect that in your emails. And thank you for joining us. Lori still there?
Yeah, I'm still here.
Okay, great.
All those questions kept flooding in at the end there.
I know, I really wanted to answer.
Questions too.
I'm still trying to type in the answers to them really quickly.
Is that what you're doing? Okay.
Well, I think there's a way that we can download them and then circulate them after.
That's what I thought. I've had that done before, but I didn't want to commit to that. The thing I was like, oh, I was starting to say it. Commit to that. We can't do it.
Yeah.
Thanks for having me, guys. I'll jump out so you guys can visit. So thanks for having
Oh,
me.
thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
My pleasure. Miss you, Lori.
Miss you too.
Bye.
Bye. Oh, she had like the 3 universities in Phoenix
Yeah.
behind her.
Yeah, it's so diplomatic.
Very
I don't
deliberate.
know why there's not one, like, I had to like remove every single person. Like, there's not just like a, hey, remove all attendees button.
Oh, that's annoying.
Yeah.
Well, that went well. Sorry. I was like trying to be like, okay, what time is it?